How I use AI at askleo. Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for askleo.com. So you might have noticed a little update at the upper right of every page on Ask Leo that says, written by a real human. That real human, of course, would be me. The interesting thing, of course, for the last 18 months or so has been the explosion of AI on the internet in various ways, various forms, and so forth. One of the problems that that's caused is that individuals are using AI to completely write articles. And unfortunately, those articles are typically much lower quality, often wrong, because I'm sure you've heard by now that AI, when writing, can get things very wrong. So I want to reassure you, of course, that I write all my articles. I'm the only one that writes content for Ask Leo. However, I do use AI as a tool with my writing. I'm going to show you in this video what I most commonly do with an article. We're actually going to take an article that I've already partly written and show you how I use AI to flush out a couple of things that AI is way better at than I am. The important thing to realize is that I'm not using it to create content. I'm not using it to express ideas. I'm using it to, well, you'll see how I'm going to be using it. So the article that we're going to look at, like I said, it's partly written, and it is titled, "What Can I Do About Phone Spam?" It is an article, a question that I got just the other day from a reader, and it's a fine article. It's a classic Ask Leo kind of article. I spent this morning writing up a draft of the article. Let's head over to my Windows machine and you can see what we're looking at. On the left-hand side, I have my editing interface. This is what I'm staring at all day long when I'm writing Ask Leo articles. And on the right-hand side, I have ChatGPT open. That is the AI tool I use by far the most. And I'll explain why in a couple of minutes. But the bottom line here is that the article is in my editor. Everything you see here in the editor is stuff that I wrote from scratch. In fact, I didn't even start with an existing article. This was all, I started with a blank page and just wrote this. Now that I've written this, there are a couple of things I like to do. One of the ways I use AI is what I call ideation. It's a fancy term for give me ideas. There are two ways that that can be used. I will sometimes use it before writing an article, just to give me some ideas of what to talk about. I still write the article, but some of the ideas come from ChatGPT. In a case like this, where I've already written the article, then I might just use AI to answer the same question and see if I missed anything. See if it gives me some additional ideas that I really ought to cover in the article. I've done that a time or two, and indeed, I have come up with a couple of bullet points that I forgot about or that I didn't think of that ended up making the article more complete, more comprehensive than it would have been had I not had AI looking over my shoulder. So in this case, we'll just go ahead and copy paste the actual question, what can I do about phone spam, and give it to ChatGPT. Now, I am using ChatGPT 4, which is the more advanced, more complete ChatGPT, because it does do a better job overall, and we'll just throw it out. And right away, ChatGPT starts giving us an answer. What's interesting is that it's giving an answer very quickly and relatively good. So let's walk through some of the ideas that it gave me. Register on the do not call list if you're in the US. Well, you can see that's also the very first thing that I talk about in the article. Use your phone's built-in features. So you can block numbers or identify potential spam calls, explore your phone's settings. Yep, that's in here too, although I tend to reference it as a function of your provider. Most of these features can be more effectively provided by the mobile provider, but the devices often have them too. Download a call blocking app. I didn't think of this. So this is a great example of an idea that I completely didn't think of that I can now take and use in this article that I'm creating. In fact, I'm just going to, so I don't forget it, because I'm actually not going to write it here in front of you, I'm just going to copy that idea and I'm going to throw it into, I'm going to throw it in here as step 5. And I will, of course, flesh that out after I've finished recording this video, because the details there don't matter for what we're talking about right now. Don't answer unknown numbers. That's a lot of what I talk about in this article. It's the old adage, if it's important to you, you'll leave me voicemail, and if it's important to me, I'll call you back. That's a great way to deal with some of these things. Be careful with your number. That too is something that I did not include, but I think I will. I'll go ahead and include that as step 6. Just because it is, again, something that is well worth mentioning. It's not always something we have in our control, but it's something that actually does add some robustness to the article that I'm writing. And report spam calls, which I actually do talk about here in the article. So bottom line here is that AI gave me 6 items that I could talk about with respect to this topic. 4 of them I'd already covered. That's good to know. But 2 of them were additional ideas that I can now flesh out and turn into content and basically make my article better. So what I'm going to do right now is pause this video recording and actually write those 2 sections, because having that content there will be important for our next steps. Okay, I'm back. I have written in text or content for those 2 sections that we just added, downloading a call blocking app and being careful with your number. Both of those, like I said, are fine additions to the article. Now, if we actually take a look at a preview of the article, we can see that there are a couple of things missing. Normally, I have an image here, and we'll get to that in a second. But right now, what I'm going to talk about is this little in short. If you take a look at many of the other Ask Leo articles, this blue is typically a box that contains a summary of the article. Ideally, it's enough of a summary that actually gives people the answer if they don't want to read through the entire article. But the bottom line is that it's here. It's normally something that I put up there, and it used to be something I'd write myself. These days, I've been using ChatGPT to give me what I would call a first draft. The way I do that is copy the entire article that I've written so far, which is why I wanted to make sure to add those 2 sections before I got to this point. Copy that to the clipboard, and now over in ChatGPT, please summarize in 50 words or less. Please is optional, but the thinking is that sometimes it might give you better answers. I have heard it both ways. And I will paste in the full text of the article and hit enter. And ChatGPT goes to work. There it is. There's a nice summary of this article. I'm finding that the summarization feature in AI tools like ChatGPT is actually one of its best uses, not just for creating summaries of my own articles, but I will often take a look at lengthy articles and I'm trying to decide if I want to invest the time in reading them. I will copy the whole thing into ChatGPT and ask it to summarize for me. That then gives me something quick that I can scan, easily digest, and make my decision as to whether or not to invest the time in the longer article. In this case, of course, like I said, we are in the process of creating the article, so I will copy what it's given me into the clipboard, go back to my editing page, and paste that into the spot where I have that summary. And I'm going to give that section a title of Dealing with Phone Spam. Now, one of the things that I absolutely do in cases like this is I now edit this summary, because ChatGPT does not write the way I write. It doesn't use the terms that I use. It doesn't use the nuances that I throw at these things. It doesn't write like me. I still, even though it's given me a first draft, I want this paragraph to sound and be like me. So I'm going to pause again while I take a few seconds and edit this paragraph. Okay, I'm back. I've written that paragraph, or I've edited the heck out of that paragraph. The wording is quite a bit different. I dropped a couple of concepts. I used terminology that I use. Basically, I just tweaked it. Again, great start. Saved me a lot of time because I tend to edit better than I write, more quickly than I write, which is it's just the way I work. So the concept here, though, is again, AI is helping me by giving me a first draft that I can then go to town on. Okay, great. We now have the summary. Now what I'm going to do here is save this draft, and then we'll go back to the preview so that you can see what we've got. Hitting F5 to refresh the page. And up at the top of the page now we have the summary box that we just talked about. Okay, we're getting there. Now, about this image, especially when it comes to visual images, I am finding that AI is way more creative than I am. I don't know if that's a reflection on AI or a reflection on me. I tend to think it's the latter, honestly. It's not something I've ever really felt good at. So finding that AI is doing the job that it's doing is actually quite refreshing for me. There are two approaches that I tend to use. They both start with, once again, copying the entire article into the clipboard. So that now includes any updates, it includes the summary and so forth. Over in ChatGPT, I'm now going to show you technique number one, and that is, please create 5 text concepts for images representing this article. And once again, we paste in the content of the article that we threw into the clipboard. And ChatGPT goes to work. Now, this is something that I have struggled with, and it is simply that you'll note I explicitly asked for 5 concepts. I didn't want it to actually generate an image, but it's generating an image. And that's honestly, that's not a bad image. But in many cases, what it will do instead, and I don't know if it's the current state of ChatGPT or a nuance in the way that I've asked the question, but, oh, it's actually generating 5 images. Fine. It will actually print a text list, a list of concepts that I can then choose from, that I would then take the concept and do the next thing. But as you can see, it's actually creating 5 images for me, which is actually pretty cool. Had I known this, I would have asked the question a little bit differently, because I don't use square images, and ChatGPT creates square images by default. So I'm going to let it finish doing the images that it's doing. Oh, and great, here is the text that goes along with each one of those images. That's great, because I can now use that text for the next stage. The question is, which one do I like the best? I think, just because it's different, I'm going to use number 2. Now, this is a test. I'm doing something now that I've never done before because, honestly, ChatGPT has never generated 5 images for me like that. I'm going to say, redo number 2, which is what it was, in 16 by 9. And it's creating the image. 16 by 9 is the aspect ratio, and if it sounds familiar, that is a 1920 by 1080 ratio. It's the HD ratio that we've all come to use on our TVs, and in some cases on our computer screens. Yep, there it is. It did exactly what I asked. It took number 2 and has turned that into an image that I can now use for this article. Now, full disclosure, I will not use the image exactly as it is. The actual resolution that I use is slightly different. I put a border around it, that kind of stuff. And that's stuff that I do in Photoshop. Yeah, some of it with AI, but it's very light. But the bottom line here is that now I've got an image to go along with this article. We're going to pause one more time while I process that image and then put it into the article. Okay, I have updated the image to my specifications, and let's insert it into the article. So I'm going to go over here to my edit post, go here to where the image is to be placed. We'll hit add media, hit select files. In this case, this file exists over on my T drive. There it is, spamflood.jpg. Double click on it. Now, this is where I'm not really done with AI. Alt text is the text that is normally used by screen readers and other visual tools for the visually impaired. So it would be nice to get a good description of this image in that field. Well, as it turns out, we already have one. Going over to the ChatGPT window, if I click on the image, this is the page that lets me download the image. In fact, clicking on this little download button is what I did to get the original from ChatGPT. But there's this circled I, which is information. If I click on that, I get the prompt. Now, I'm going to copy that into the clipboard and now paste that over into my alt text. An illustration of a person sitting at a desk, overwhelmed by a flood of phone calls and text messages pouring out from the smartphone like water. Each call and message is visually marked as spam, forming a wave. Right. So that's good. We'll not worry about the metaphorical representation part of this. It's the physical description that I care about. Now, there's something worth noting about this, and this is also true for a lot of the images that ChatGPT generates. You'll notice that very strictly, the description doesn't exactly match the image. In this case, it's a very minor difference because it's talking about pouring out of their smartphone like water, except there's no smartphone in the picture, right? All you can see there is a desk phone and a laptop in front of the person that is dealing with this. This, again, is very, very common. But the good news, at least from my perspective, is that it is usually close enough for the image to be useful to me. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a title and a caption, crediting Dolly for the image. I don't try and hide any of what I'm doing here. In fact, the fact that I'm publishing this video is also part of that effort. But I definitely want to make sure that there's no illusion about me trying to pass off an image as anything other than AI generated. And we insert that into the post. And the other thing I do, since posts have featured images, and I select that as the featured image. Now, if I save the draft and go back over to the preview and hit refresh, now we've got something that's starting to look a little bit more like a finished article. We've got my title, the subtitle, the excerpt that you probably saw get placed in there, the featured image at the top of the article, the intro that I've written, the summary that AI helped me write, the content that is 100% written by me. The only changes to this content that you will see between now and the time this article actually gets published, which, based on the publishing schedule that I'm working with, is probably going to be about a week after this video is published, is that my editor will have done her magic to this text and made her changes. Basically, her job is to make me sound like a better writer than I really am. And so there are definitely changes that happen to the article in terms of wording and ideas and so forth that she may point out along the way. But at this point, I'm pretty much done with the article myself. The end is here, and I think that's basically it. So I wanted to present this to you specifically because this is something that I think people are going to be using more and more. AI is absolutely in the building. People are using it for various things. I like the model of treating AI tools like interns, like unpaid interns. They have good ideas, but you can't trust them. You've got to know what you're looking for in order to make sure you're getting what you asked for. We've seen a couple of places here where the text isn't quite what I would want, or the image doesn't quite match what I asked for. But the bottom line here is it saved me a ton of time, particularly in the image generation part. So it is something that I think we're going to see a lot more of, and I think it's worth understanding and being aware of where the content is coming from and how upfront the creators of that content are about its origins. Now, I've shown you in this video creating this specific article, What Can I Do About Phone Spam? The companion article for this video, askleo.com/168449, which is also called How I Use AI at AskLeo, goes through the same process for a different article that will have already been published. The article is there a way to use OneDrive as a dumb hard drive? And in that, I go through the exact same steps that I've shown you here, except with a completely different set of content. I think you'll find that also quite interesting and instructive or illustrative of exactly how AI, one way that AI can be used rather than abused. So I hope you find it all interesting and helpful. For updates, for comments, for, like I said, that other article shown as being created using AI as a tool is at askleo.com/168449. I'm Leo Notenboom, and this is written by a human at askleo.com. Thanks for watching.